Another option is building a class library. If I want to have a non-user interface and just have my logic deployed as a DLL or a dynamic link library, I can use a class library. Most of the components in the system.asterisk namespace, such as system.data, which is ADO.net, system.xml, system.networking, have all been created as class libraries. This allows you to provide an object-oriented model that later different applications can share. You can also use classes directly in your project itself. We'll be doing this in the series by adding a class library directly to our Windows Forms application. Keep in mind when you deploy a class library, if it's a desktop application, it can exist in either the desktop or the application layer. For a web application, that might be on a web farm, or you may choose to have a separate application server should your system be quite large. Another choice is to build a console application. This provides a command line interface to work with a particular service or a series of services. Again, the user interface for this is not a forms-based interface and is traditionally used when testing a particular set of services or server. Another set of options is encapsulating your logic in a set of controls or in many user interfaces. You can do this with control libraries with Windows Forms, or with web forms you can do this using the ASP.NET AJAX server control, the server control extender, or just creating a typical ASP.NET server-side control. This way, you can build your own set of custom controls to either supplement or replace the controls that come with Visual Studio 2008. Visual Studio 2008 also enhances your choices for testing. You can build a test project, or if you'd like, you can take one of your existing projects and add unit or system or component tests directly into your project and encapsulate them inside of a test project or a series of tests. Workflow is another enhancement to Visual Studio 2008. Not only can you work with SharePoint workflows, but you can build your own custom workflows using the Windows Workflow Foundation. A lot of times people will say, I don't need workflow. They don't find a place where they have a particular decision tree or a place where routing needs to occur. If your application has the word state or status as one of the fields, properties, or column types, then your application has workflow. If the state, for example, of a ticket changes from open to closed to resolved, right there, that's workflow. In that case, you may consider using a state machine to manage that workflow. So if you have a status change, typically today, without workflow, you would build an if-then logic, saying, if this status, then do this. Or maybe if you have multiple statuses, you would say select case. What happens if you have a new status, such as return to sender? You'd have to go back into that code, into that if-then statement or that select case statement, and then add another line, recompile your code. With attribute-based workflow, you no longer have to worry about that. You don't have to recompile your code every time you have another step in a workflow process. And instead, you can leverage a state machine workflow library or sequential workflow activity libraries and use those in a declarative fashion similar to working with Visio instead of recompiling your code. Feel free to experiment with the other applications such as the database, reporting, and smart device applications that we have installed with Visual Studio 2008. But now you have a good understanding of all the choices that you have and why you should make those choices. In Visual Studio 2008, you'll see many of the same tools used again and again, regardless of what template you choose. In this series, we'll select the Windows template and show you all the tools by delving deeper into the IDE to look at the wizards, controls, and forms you can use with this particular template. Many of these templates share in common a lot of these tools.